Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back. I'm James and you're watching Blue Dog Aquatics. Alright guys, as you can see, look, hands free. That's because, go figure, my camera's working again. So we're not using the phone, we're using my expensive camera, and I swear to God it happens every time like this. You drive all the way across town to take it to the camera shop to have them figure out what's going on with it, only to walk in the door and the second they turn it on, nothing's wrong. So, I mean, I guess I'm happy it's working. I'm happy it didn't cost me money to fix, or there weren't any issues. So that's a huge relief. Also, if you haven't checked it out on our community page, we were doing a poll to see which snakes people prefer between ball pythons, king snakes, rat snakes, corn snakes, and milk snakes. Right now it's in a three-way tie between ball pythons, king snakes, and corn snakes, which actually surprises me a little bit. Because, I mean, ball pythons, yeah, I expected them to be out there. Most people prefer ball pythons because they can be used for beginners, and they're just overall very simple to take care of and very good pets. Whereas when you get into the king snakes, the rat snakes, and the corn snakes, sometimes they have attitude issues, and so it can make it tricky to have them if someone likes to hold them a lot. I'm not saying it's impossible for them to get to that point. They just need to be worked with a lot more versus like a ball python. Now, one that kind of shocked me that doesn't have any votes right now is milk snakes. And for me, milk snakes are very similar in the regards to handleability as I would assume would be like a ball python. They're very mild mannered. They're just not overly feisty like you would see in a king snake or a rat snake. But anyways, we digress. But today we're doing, I know I had someone message on one of my posts, or on one of my channel, or one of my videos. They're like, well, you know, you started with aquatic and then you went and added reptiles, but most of the videos that you do are reptiles versus aquatics. Well, there's a very good reason for that. Right now, since the store is taking forever, I mean, how hard is it? They went in, said, oh, it's done. Go in, because I'm like, yep. Start placing delivery orders so I can have enclosures delivered and all the custom tanks and everything that's going to be delivered to the store. I start making that train because they said it's done. Only to find out there's no flooring. And I touched on this a little bit in the last video, and I'm like, I don't know how someone can forget flooring. But anyways, I was like, they're like, oh, it was an oversight. Okay, whatever. Crap happens. But here we are 2 weeks later, and they're like, well, we're still trying to get in touch with the flooring guy. Dude, you need to make a Menards run or something. It does not have to be this pristine high dollar floor. I mean, I was going to do laminate flooring, the wood floating floor, but that doesn't work because, let's say, God forbid, I have a tank blow out or something like that. You know, that's going to warp the heck out of that flooring. Not to mention, I mean, the paludarium is going to be set up. That's roughly 180 gallons. For granted, only the bottom section's water, but that's still a ton of weight. I have a 220 over here in the corner that, I mean, you got to figure 8 pounds per gallon at 200 gallons. I mean, that's a lot of weight. And I didn't want that weight over time crushing the floor. So we went with the linoleum where, you know, it comes in a big roll and you just roll it out. But no, apparently that is way more complicated. But I don't know. It's frustrating because now I have all this stuff coming in and all these orders coming in, and I'm having to put everything on rollers, which is costing me money because I'm going to have to go buy rollers just to put everything on so they can move it around while they're doing the flooring. But anyway, so back to why I do more reptiles than aquatics. Well, the simple fact is that currently we have more reptiles in stock than we do aquatic. I haven't been bringing in orders of aquatic because I was anticipating the move to the store, and so I'm like, well, I don't want to bring them here to be for 2 weeks and then them have to go get bundled or packaged up again and taken to the store and then reintroduced to an entirely new tank, and that's just not fair to the animal. I mean, whether it's reptiles or whether it's aquatic life, it's just unfair and adds so much stress to their setup. But so yeah, right now we're actually running low, even low on reptiles. We do have a reptile that I've been hunting for a while. It will be here. Hopefully, I'm hoping by the Monday video. If not, you guys will see it. We'll do a sneak preview of it on next Friday. And with Thanksgiving, I want to say it early. Make sure to enjoy this time with your loved ones. As a vet myself, not every soldier gets to be home, gets to be with their family, and I've experienced that with my time in Afghanistan. So make sure to thank a soldier because, and not just soldiers, police officers, firefighters, EMTs, you know, they're out there year round. I mean, they don't get time off to go spend with their families. You know, they got to be out there doing the job, and so make sure to thank them and tell them that you're thankful that they're keeping us safe and protecting it. And I know, and I don't want to get political because I know there's a lot of controversy going on in this world, but I'll tell you one thing for 100% sure of what I believe in. And I believe in this country. I believe that we will get back to where it's about the people. And I mean, there's just so much hate in the world, and that's not the way it should be. I mean, you look back 60 years and, you know, everybody would wave, and there was no, I mean, you waved at your neighbor, you knew your neighbor, but now it's like, oh, social media, this person doesn't like toast, we should block them. I mean, there's no room in this world for it, because I guarantee you, if you start pushing and hating every single person out in this world, then you're going to end up alone, and that's not a way to live your life. You should live your life to the fullest and meet all different people from all around the world. So I've traveled all around the world, and I'll tell you what, it is fascinating. I mean, when I was in Germany or in Puerto Rico, or, you know, all over in these foreign countries, you know, it's amazing to learn things that they grew up with, or issues that they've run into throughout society. But I'll tell you what, you know, United States, we need to stand strong, and we need to be thankful for what we have and the freedom that we have. But anyway, that's all I'm going to say political. That's it. If you want to comment, blow up me. I'll tell you 100% I support the flag, as I support every man and woman that's in uniform. So, with that being said, so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Caridina and Neocaridina freshwater shrimp. One of the things that I specialize in, right now I think we have 26 or 27 species. We're really low. Normally we have a lot more species than that, but in Aquashella Dallas, we sold off everything. Well, I think we had 14 species, something, 12 or 14. We only brought 500 shrimp, which I'm kind of glad we did, because there wasn't, I mean, for granted, yes, I still sold out, but there wasn't a whole lot of sales when it came to shrimp. I mean, I sold quite a few snakes, and then, as you all know, we sold the captain off. Now, Hot Rod is our new show and breeding chameleon. He will be in Orlando at Boots, so make sure to come check him out. He's growing like a weed. Right now he's kind of in molt, or not molt, shedding. And it's so funny when they shed. They look like, it's like little confetti balls. They're just like but anyway, so back to shrimp. There's always people that ask me, you know, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video on which I prefer, whether it's a Neocaridina or a Caridina species. And I mean, there's over 290 species of freshwater shrimp, and there's more being discovered each and every day. And to be honest, I mean, there's pros and cons to both. Let's start with Neos. Now, Neocaridina are, you know, they're awesome little creatures. From everything from a Bloody Mary to a cherry shrimp to a blue dream to a green jade, ultra gold, super yellows, blue jellies, blue velvets. I mean, the list goes on and on as far as what types of Neocaridina there are. And people ask me, well, are they easy to take care of? Yes. Neocaridina shrimp. Let's emphasize on one of them. We'll talk about Bloody Marys, and I'll post a couple of pictures, you know, throughout this, showing different Neocaridina species. That way, if you are in the market for some, check us out at www.bluedogaquatics.org, or you can send us a direct message and see what we have in stock. Like I said, right now our numbers are a little low, but we will always get you taken care of. But, so, let's talk about the Bloody Mary, or the Blue Dream. You know, it's toss-up. Those are a couple of my favorite Neo species. Now, when it comes to them and their parameters, Neocaridina are more acceptable, or, how do I put this? They're more tolerant of water parameter variances. And the way I say that is because if your water parameters get a little off and they're outside the scope, maybe you're a first-time beginner, or maybe you're an experienced breeder and that tank just slipped your mind and it kind of got away from you. You know, it happens to all of us. Neocaridina are more forgiving when it comes to the water parameters fluctuating. Now, if you want me to do a whole video on parameters for the Neocaridina and the Caridina, we can do that 100%. Drop a comment down below and let us know what you think. Also, while I'm on it, make sure to like and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Like I said before, our TikTok is blowing up. I don't even know how. I just post random videos of snakes and chameleons. Now that our camera is working, we're going to try and do one on the shrimp with the macro lenses. So hopefully that comes out. I'll be working on that probably this weekend or maybe next weekend. With Thanksgiving coming up, my schedule's gotten really tight. But yeah, so with that being said, I'll kind of go into brief on it. Some things you need for a Neocaridina. I use pool sand for my Neo species, and that's because pool sand is inert. Means that there's nothing in the substrate that is going to fluctuate your parameters. Now, and I'll talk about this a little bit more when I get into the Caridina, but Caridina, I use a different substrate. Now, let's stay with the Neos here. So, I use white pool sand. I ordered it on Amazon, have it delivered directly to my door, and I swear to God, by this point, they're like, how big is the pool? Like, but, I mean, it doesn't have to be terribly thick. I use driftwood in all my tanks. Now, you have to be careful with driftwood, especially if it's a new piece. And what I mean by new piece is if it's a brand new piece that hasn't been soaked. So when you get a piece of driftwood, it's all dry and everything like that, and when you put it in the tank, it floats. That's because it hasn't been given time to soak properly. And I mean, depending on the size of the driftwood, it could take a week, it could take a year. I mean, I got a piece of driftwood downstairs that, no joke, is probably 4 foot long, and it's been floating for 4 years. I mean, but there's ways to get around that, and the easiest one is to either drill holes through it so that it saturates it more quickly, or what most people do is they put pieces of slate and they glue it or bind it to the slate so that way it holds it underwater. Does that make it saturate more quickly? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. It depends on the tank I'm setting up. All the wood that I have in my shrimp tanks right now has been saturated. It sits in my pond, and then when they start sinking, then they get cleaned, and then they get moved to a shrimp tank or another community tank. Now, with driftwood, you have tannins. So the driftwood will actually put off tannins in the water, and that's when you look at a tank with driftwood and you see that it's kind of like a brownish or like a tea-colored water. That is the saturation that's coming off of the driftwood into your water. Now, most of the time this is beneficial, but you got to be careful because it can fluctuate depending on where that driftwood came from or what it is. Now, don't want to go into too much depth into it. So we have the pool sand, we have the tannin, or we have, not the tannins, we have the driftwood. I also put rocks in there and miscellaneous. I don't do a whole lot of decorations because I do sell shrimp, and so if you sell shrimp, you want to keep the tank as easy to access as possible. If it's a display tank and it's at your house and you have no intention of ever selling a single thing in there or getting rid of it, by all means, decorate to your heart's content. The more hiding spaces you have, the more they're going to hide because they want to feel protected. I also put almond leaves in, and that helps with the pH levels and the GH as well, the general hardness. Things to test when you're testing your shrimp tanks is, first and foremost, you want to test your TDS or your total waste. They actually have digital readers for that. And then second, you want to test your pH. Your pH is very crucial, especially when it comes to the Caridina species. Your general GH or your general hardness, that is something that's very crucial when it comes to shrimp. That's what helps them or allows them to molt properly. Some people notice that in their tanks, they don't have, or like they see that a shrimp died like halfway through its molt, and that's probably because your general hardness levels aren't where they need to be. And then last is your KH. Temperature of them, it really depends on if you want them to breed or not. If you want a shrimp to live longer, then you want to keep it in the 65 to 72 degree range. They'll grow a lot slower, and the breeding will be a lot slower too. If you bump that up into the 78 to 82 range, they tend to breed faster in my experience. That's just what I've seen. Now, so we have the pool sand, we have the driftwood, we have the rocks, we have the almond leaves. What's left? Well, lighting. I also have plants in there. I do live plants, and that's also to help balance out my parameter levels. A water lettuce or water sprite or Java moss. I mean, there's so many out there that are beneficial to aquariums and helping those water parameters stay very balanced. Now, someone that has bare bones in their tank and doesn't have a whole lot and doesn't use almond leaves or live plants, they'll notice that they'll fight their parameters a lot more, and they're going to be doing water changes probably weekly. For me, the way my water parameters are and the way I have my tank set up, I do water changes once every 3 weeks, and even then it's just barely. And depending on how big of a water change you need depends on how far off the water parameters. I will say something. I did a test sample. I had a KH, or I'm sorry, not a KH. My pH on my coal tank was getting a little out of whack, and so I needed to address it. I had done water changes, and it wasn't doing the job. And so I was like, I seen this chemical and it said pH down. I will tell you from experience, take a small batch of water, because there's no instructions on how much to add at all on these bottles. Well, on the ones I got anyway. The pH up and the pH down, yeah. There's no. That is heavily concentrated pH reducer. So I made the mistake of all I did was a capful. That's it, in a 10-gallon tank. And guess what it did? It nuked that entire tank, because it dropped the levels so quickly that, yeah, it was just bad. So if you are experimenting with a new chemical, I'd recommend taking a sample of water from one of the tanks and trying it in there to see if there aren't instructions on how much to use. I would use it in a small sample before you introduce it into your tanks. For granted, I mean, they were just coals, but still, you know, coals are still living animals. But, so, let's get back to Neocaridinas. Now, the Bloody Mary, I love having them because they're just so vibrant and so red. But a couple things with them is, you know, and this is with any Neo species, I'm just more so talking in general. When I guarantee you, shrimp people that look at this will know, they're like, yep, I can relate to that. You ever looked at your tank and, you know, you go to the store, you buy, let's say, 10 shrimp. Then after a couple of months, you're like, huh, where are they all going? Well, shrimp can climb. I don't use glass lids. I use pieces of, it's a plastic enamel that I use that seals the top of the tank. The only hole is for the airline to come down into the tank, and that's what the bubbler is for. Now, before I did this with all the tanks, I realized that I was having shrimp just vanish, and I had no explanation as to why, until I did a deep clean of the fish room. And you know, I'm vacuuming underneath the shrimp rack, and I noticed dried out bodies of Bloody Marys. They were climbing out of the tank and dropping. That's how sometimes, if you have tanks that are right next to each other, you'll have one color. So let's say you have a Bloody Mary and a Blue Dream. They'll climb from one into the other if they can. Had no idea shrimp did that. But it definitely makes you change the way you do stuff. Now, that being said, do I recommend Neocaridina over Caridina? Well, let's get into Caridina. Now, when it comes to the Caridina species, they're on the other end of the spectrum. This is where you're going to have your blue bolts and your crystal blacks, or your galaxies, or your pintos. Let's just use blue bolts. They're honestly one of my favorite shrimp, and we'll post a couple of pictures up here for you. Caridina species are not so forgiving when it comes to water changes and parameters. There are certain Caridina species that are very precise on what they need to be, and like I said, if you want me to do a video on that, on different shrimp and their exact parameters on what they need to be, drop a comment down below, let me know. But so let's take blue bolts for example. Now, you remember all the stuff I said in the Neo as far as what I use in their tanks and this and that. The difference between the Neo and the Caridina is the substrate. So The Neos had the inert white pool sand. The Caridina species have the fluval volcanic stratumum substrate. And why I use the fluval substrate for the Caridina species is because of the pH level that is in the substrate. When you use fluval for your Caridina species, it tends to be, most Caridina species tend to be right at that 7 mark for pH. And that fluval substrate keeps it there. As long as you're doing your standard water changes and that, it'll keep right there. Now, I say that too, but I also say this. It also depends on what type of water you're using. Now, there are people out there that use tap water. Hey, that's fine. You treat it properly, no issue. There's successful colonies of shrimp that are raised in tap water. Then you have remineralized RO water. Now, for those of you that don't know what RO water is, it is think of a big filter, and the water comes in your tap line right here. And then it goes through filter, 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 and when it comes in, it brings that from my water in the house without RO is about 80. After it goes through the after it goes through the filtering process, it comes out at 0. Now, I use RO, straight RO. And the reason I do that is because it gives me better control over the parameters. There's no, oh, one day the tap water is 8.0 and the next day it's 5.4. I mean, I'm not saying that I know that for certain. I'm saying that tap water is a little bit more unpredictable because of the city changing how it treats its water. Also, you got to make sure with tap water to dechlorinate. Now, so I use RO. So when I do water changes, I use RO. So let's say that the total waste of the TDS is 200. I do a water change. Let's say I do a 50% water change, and it brings that down to 150. Okay. Well, I want to keep my TDS between that 150, 250 mark. So maybe it's getting on the little low end for me. What I use is, to remineralize is actually called Replenish. It is a fluval brand chemical that adds in mineralization to the water. And all you need is a capful. Don't go crazy. Your parameters will go nuts if you add more than a capful at a time. You do the water change, let it sit for a couple of days to let it cycle through, test your levels again. If it's a little low, add a capful. See how far that capful brings up your levels, and give it about a week to see how it's affecting your tank. Now, the last phase of that would be remineralized RO. There's a lot of pet stores that sell it. I don't. And all that is that's treated RO water to be at very precise water parameters. I don't know what you or your neighbor or 50 other people, I don't know what they keep their tanks at. There's a lot of people that keep tanks at different parameters. Whatever works for them. Let's say John Doe has his water parameters at pH is 7.8. Guess what? If his shrimp are reproducing and doing well and staying healthy, then bravo, John Doe. I can't criticize him on something that is being successful and something that is working. But, so, back to Caridina species. Like I said, Neocaridina are more forgiving when it comes to water parameters. Caridina are more precise. When you have your, not so much on total waste, but Caridina get very particular when it comes to your pH and your GH, your general hardness. Those are the ones that have to be zeroed in, pretty well precise for Caridina. If you notice in your tank at home, if let's say you have a Caridina tank that's set up and they're not reproducing. They're just, you know, I mean, they look happy, but they're just not doing their thing. They're just not reproducing for you. Well, I would definitely check your pH and your GH and see where they're at, because when I first started doing shrimp years ago, I had the same thing. I had crystal blacks were my first Caridina species. I had never done Caridina species. To be honest, when I first started doing shrimp, I had no idea what TDS, pH, GH, or KH even meant. I just knew that, okay, you just have to do a water changes. I knew you had to treat the tap water, but that was it. I didn't know anything past that. Obviously, I've come a long way since then through research and trial and error over the years, but I didn't know what the water parameters were, and I thought as long as they were healthy and as long as they were eating, that I was good to go. But I did notice that they weren't reproducing, and so one of my buddies told me, he's like, well, what are your water parameters? What the hell are those? So I went out and got myself a TDS meter and a pH meter, and then unfortunately there's not a GH or KH. You still have to do the drip tubes, which, ugh. Someone please create a GH and a KH digital reader. I would love one. I will buy it from you today. So I had a friend come over and we tested the water levels. The TDS, I kid you not, was 700. And he's like, how are your shrimp still alive? I'm like, I don't know. I do water changes every week. Like, what's the issue? Well, then he tested the pH. The pH was at 8.8. 8.8. Crystal blacks typically need to be about 7. Went and tested the GH. The GH was 7 something. Like 7.5. They're supposed to be at 5. And then the KH was 12. I like to keep my tanks at 0. Well, between 0 and like 4. But they were so far off that the shrimp just wouldn't breed. And so we went through, you know, we did, I think we did like a 75% water change, put in straight RO water, and that took a couple of months just to neutralize how toxic that water was. And once I got it down to where the parameters needed to be, within a week, they started breeding. I was blown away. Whereas on the same side, Neos, they could care less. As long as they can swim around and something's not trying to eat them, they'll try and reproduce. It still has to be relative to what their parameters need to be. Like let's say that they need to be at like 7.5. If it's like 15, yeah, they're probably not going to breed. But as long as they're within that range of, let's say, like 6 to 8, they're still going to breed for you. So when it comes to which one I like better versus Neocaridina or Caridina species, it's a toss-up. Because honestly, I love the beauty of each one. I love the challenges of each one. Of all of the, and I know this is going to sound so bad, but of all the shrimp out there, as far as Caridina or the Neos, I want to say my favorite Caridina species would be blue bolts. I love the coloration. Blue is my favorite color. When it comes to the Neos, I would say sun-kissed orange or Bloody Marys are my favorite. Now there are also Bababooey shrimp, but I mean that's a whole other. You want to talk about very specific and needy shrimp? Zebra Bababooies, look them up. They are so pinpoint precise and they are so temperamental. You put them in a bag, walk them across the living room, and they're dead. I mean, they are so temperamental. But we'll save that for another day. We actually don't even have them in stock right now. But yeah, guys. And what we'll also do here is we'll actually do a poll on on my community channel. Make sure to check that out, and we'll put it up, Caridina versus Neocaridina, and see which one comes out on top. But for me, it's an honest-to-God tie. I enjoy them. I've been doing them for so long that I just enjoy all the species, no matter what they are. I really don't have a favorite. But guys, as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. We come to you every Monday and Friday with new videos. And as always, the big question, your tank or mine?